Hello, thank you for joining us as you come in. We are so excited to have you with us tonight. We're going to give it about 2 or 3 more minutes as people continue to join us. But to give you a little bit of an overview, today we're going to be talking about access to the ballot box, all the information that you need to know prior to and while you are there. If you have any questions for us as we're going forward, feel free to put those into the chat box. And while we are getting ready, if you want to, you can turn your camera on and join us for some conversation. You certainly do not have to. We understand either way. Jen, as we were getting ready, you were talking about some work that you have done in the past with SNCC, and I would love if there's ever an opportunity to sit down and learn more about that work, because I can only imagine some of the stories you've got.
Well, it was a very wonderful opportunity for all of us who were young people at that time. I was 13, and some of my high school colleagues who actually went on the Freedom Summer experienced is they registered voters, they taught people to read and write, and that was a really significant hallmark of what citizen activism can do. And what I was able to do was to help desegregate a swimming pool in Cairo, Illinois. I lived in Southern Illinois, which is pretty much the South. Mm-hmm. And we were beaten up by the KKK regularly. And the town finally decided they were just going to close the public swimming pool rather than have to deal with this. But that didn't last very long, because the white residents said, why are we paying taxes for a swimming pool? Come on, open it back up and let it be open for everybody. So it was a 3 or 4 year tug of war, but we finally got that done. But in the process, I learned nonviolent resistance. I learned just being pig-headed and persistent. And I also learned a lot about what needed to happen to change our election laws, because the right to vote, even though it was supposed to be put into place by the 15th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, that wasn't actually happening. And even when we finally passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, there were a whole number of barriers, and we're still dealing with them today. And I'd love to talk with that about that with those who might want to help us do some more reform here in Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is such important work. And you know, as a person who's a bit younger, thank you for sort of, you know, clearing that pathway as much as you can, because it is so important, and we would not be where we are today without folks like you doing that work. So thank you. It is now 6:35, so I think we are going to go ahead and get started with our program. First, I would just like to thank and welcome everyone again into the room. Ypsi Can I Share is presenting a community conversation today to talk about all of the ways in which you are able to access your ballot box. Hopefully, we're going to share some new information and expose people to some new tools today. We'll also be going over the 2022 ballot in a little bit of detail. It is a large ballot this year with a lot of different things on it, and we want to make sure that everyone has access not only to the information needed to cast their vote, but also the information that they may need so that they can cast the most informed vote possible. As a bit of an overview, like I said, we're going to talk about some tips, some tricks, some access points. And then we will go into the partisan section of the ballot, and we'll talk more about what that means. And then we will go into the nonpartisan section of the ballot. And again, we'll talk more about what that means. To start us off, I'm going to pass it over to our first panelist, Jan BenDor. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you very much. The structure of every ballot is pretty much set in state law, but it can be very confusing to a lot of people. We started following rules about how ballots will look and how they're printed in the late 70s. And unfortunately, the way ballots are printed and the way they look is not necessarily very easy for a lot of people to read. So if every letter in the printing of the ballot has to be the same font, that's not very good for the human eye. If you don't have enough white space in the ballot, you can't really understand it very well. And for people who already have visual problems or reading ability problems, our ballots are really not very user-friendly. And I've talked with designers who have much better ideas about how to make our ballots user-friendly. If you look at this preview ballot, it was printed in September of this year. It has the first part of the ballot structured as the partisan section. So this is where you vote for candidates who are identified with one of Michigan's 7 allowed political parties. Yeah, 7 parties, believe it or not. And the partisan section starts with the straight party ticket. If you don't want to go through all the partisan candidates and vote for them individually, you have the right, based on a constitutional amendment that we, the voters, approved in 2018, you have the right to just vote a straight party ticket. So you can vote for everybody running on the Democratic Party, Republican Party, Libertarian Party, US taxpayers, Working Class Party, Green Party, Natural Law Party. If you haven't heard of these parties, you ought to look them up. They're pretty interesting. If you want to vote for some individuals who are not necessarily going to be included in your favorite party, then you can go through the rest of the partisan ballot, state positions, starting with the governor and the lieutenant governor, going all the way down to the Secretary of State, the Attorney General. These are at the top of your ticket. Congressional positions. We have new congressional districts. We're electing new members of Congress every 2 years. And your district will be shown on your ballot. You only get to vote for one of the members of Congress from Michigan. And if you voted a straight party, and let's say you voted for the Green Party, there isn't a Green Party member representative running for Congress in my district. So I couldn't cast a vote unless I decided, well, okay, who are my choices? And my ballot only has a Democrat and a Republican. So I can choose one of those two, since there isn't a Green running. And the same as I go down my ballot, looking at the people who are running for the legislature. We have 2 houses of the legislature, the state Senate and the state House. So I'm going to get to vote for a state senator. I'm going to get to vote for a state representative. And again, if there isn't somebody from the straight party that I voted for, because the Working Class Party just didn't field candidates for this particular race, then I can vote for one of the people on the ballot, and that will count. That's how the system works. The State Board of Education, believe it or not, is a partisan race. So you can vote the straight ticket, you can vote for individuals. Just bear in mind that when you vote for an individual that's different from your straight ticket choice, that's going to override, the individual vote will override your straight ticket. So that is something to keep in mind. That's how the programming works. It's how it's worked since the 70s, nothing new. Same way with the state boards. We have 3 major universities in Michigan, and they have boards of directors, boards of regents that are elected by the people. We have lots of other universities where the governor appoints the members, and they're not going to be on your ballot. You may think that's unfortunate, but that's the way it works. So if you have a partisan city government, then your partisan candidates for city council will be on here too. Now, bear in mind, you may be in a city that has a city charter that says everybody in our city is nonpartisan. So they won't be on the partisan section of the ballot, which is mostly on the first page of your ballot. You'll have to look for them in the nonpartisan section coming up. The nonpartisan section has city candidates who are nonpartisan. It has judicial candidates, justice of the Supreme Court, really, really important. These people really have a lot to do with our lives and our future. They decide very major kinds of situations, like if you burned to death, is your landlord going to be held responsible for your death? I mean, these are really very horrible decisions. They make these decisions. The Court of Appeals, there are districts for each part of Michigan, and your district will show up on your ballot. Unfortunately, there aren't always candidates competing for these judgeships. So you might see only one candidate, and it says vote for no more than one. Well, there's only one, but you could write someone in. They'd have to be a candidate who'd already registered a week before to be a valid write-in candidate. So mostly you're not going to get much action in these races, which is unfortunate. We ought to have more competition there. Going to the back of your ballot, there's going to be more nonpartisan decisions for you to make. And again, judgeships, often not a lot of competition. In my ballot, I can see that there is actually competition. There are 2 people running for 1 seat. So I'm going to have to do some research. How can I do that? Well, you might not have been aware that we have organizations such as the State Bar of Michigan and the Women Lawyers of Michigan, and they actually interview and rank candidates for these positions. And they also do that for local judgeships. And they have a lot of knowledge, and they have actually dealt with these people either head-to-head in court or as judges in lower courts. So they know a lot that we wouldn't have a way to find out. And I value their opinions. So they have posted on their website, State Bar of Michigan, Women Lawyers of Michigan, and sometimes other groups, Black lawyers. There are several groups that make their endorsements known. And that can be very helpful to you as you're pondering your ballot, using this sample ballot that you've got to mark your preferences. You can take the sample ballot with you, either on your phone or in your pocket when you actually go to cast your vote, or vote it on your kitchen table. Now we get to the local courts, and we have the circuit courts. And these are your county level courts that do a lot of really major decisions, cases on criminal charges, cases on very major civil competitions and conflicts. And this is where you can get really good information from these lawyer groups. I would never trust the endorsement of a partisan group for most of these judicial races, with the exception of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court candidates are actually nominated by the political parties. And so these really are partisan races, even though they're not looking like that on the ballot. And that endorsement has some weight.
Well, it's not just an endorsement, it's actually the nomination for the.
It's a nomination,
Both
and
Kyra and Rick Bernstein, for example, were nominated at the Democratic Party convention in
exactly.
August, which is kind of a misnomer for them, for that to even be considered nonpartisan, when in fact both them and the Republicans were selected at their respective conventions. So
Exactly. It is a failure of information in our truth in balloting. So that's why I make this as an exception. If a political party has nominated a judicial candidate to the state Supreme Court, then that's definitely not a nonpartisan race.
So yeah, so basically, if you support the Republicans, you want to vote for Carrie Lee Morgan or Brian Zera. If you support the Democrats, you should vote for my friends, both of them, Richard Bernstein and Kyra Harris-Bolden. So
right, exactly. So that's something just to put in the back of your brain, because that's an exception to the rule that I'm suggesting, because the rest of these are nonpartisan races. Really, you should have some commitment to researching these candidates apart from any partisan endorsement, and that would be your county level circuit and district courts. And then finally, if we're getting to the very back of the ballot, you're going to see Community College Board of Trustees. In almost every county, there's a community college. They're not partisan. Very hard to get information on these people. I have bugged my community college to put information about them on the community college website. Hey, come on, let's give some information out to the community about who these people are. They're going to be managing a multi-million-dollar budget. I haven't had a lot of luck with that, unfortunately, but I'm working on it. So you then will ask, okay, give me the phone numbers of these people. I would like to call them and ask them. I'm a student at that college. I want to know what you're going to do about problem X. And talk to these people.
If you're a partisan, whether you're Republican or Democrat, full disclosure, I'm a Democrat. Then I mean, what I would do is I would call the president of, or even just a member of the local Democratic club or progressive organization, and ask them who they have endorsed, who they support. And that's usually, a pretty, if the person or the organization that endorsed this person shares your political leanings, then just, if they're a source you trust, then let them do the research for you. Or even, the League of Women Voters, which is nonpartisan, they're strictly nonpartisan, Ballotpedia.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that would be a chance for each of these candidates to express themselves in response to the League's questionnaire. And that is 411.org. The League will collect these questionnaire answers. And thank you. You put the guide right up on our chat. These self-expressed answers are usually very good. They are comprehensive if the candidate really knows their stuff. But I would caution you about going from only one source. For example, if you look at the Washington Community College trustee race, and you go by what little you know, and you see one of these candidates is William G. Milliken Jr. Gee, that's a familiar name. I know that name. I guess I'll vote for that person. Well, wait a minute. William G. Milliken was, in fact, a long-serving governor of the state of Michigan. He was a Republican. He was known as a very moderate Republican.
I'd even say liberal Republican, back when they still were liberals.
Back when that might have been a thing. But you don't know from William G. Jr. just what he backs in terms of the community college programs, plans. What do they intend to do about job training? So don't go from just name recognition. That may not be a good way to make your decision. And the same with the local school districts. Community schools used to have their own elections. They used to be in May. And I won't go into the history of that change, but now a lot of them are electing their board members in November, and they tend to get lost in the shuffle. People who don't have children in the schools just don't track these situations. So this is another situation where I would say do your own homework. Go to the league website, 411.org. See if the newspaper has published any questionnaires. Look around, because these people might be extremely different in their policies. You know, we might be interested in what they're going to do about some of the controversies that are roiling our education system right now.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, school board tended to be fairly nonpartisan up until relatively recently, but now with you know, so much of the MAGA crowd coming in and pushing real hard to burn books and ban books, and
it's terrible.
I think it's all the more reason why you'd want to get with your local Oakland County or Washtenaw County, or even city, you know, like say, for example, Livonia or Ypsilanti, or not actually Ann Arbor or Eastern Washtenaw Democrats, for example. If you're in Washtenaw, find out who your local Democrats are and see who they're supporting, because otherwise you might inadvertently, because they got an Irish sounding name, you vote for that person and they end up being someone who's in the antithesis of what you'd want to see in a school board member. And all the more reason why, because this affects you directly. You know,
Yeah.
Everyone wants to vote for president, but nobody shows up to vote for their local candidates, which to me has always been baffling to me, because your local, your school board, your board of trustees, or your city council, whatever they call them, depending on where you're at, your mayor, all of that, or even your local state rep or county commissioners have a lot more direct impact on what's going on with your life and your pocketbook than what's going on in Washington. And I'm not saying you shouldn't vote for people for president, or mind you, but it just seems to me like people tend to ignore the local stuff. So many people I know say,
and they don't know how these things are connected with what they care about. Whether you're a renter or a property owner, you're paying taxes into your public school district. You will want to make sure that your money that you're paying is going to a good educational system for children who are going to succeed or not, based on how well they can read and write and how well they can master important skills and subjects. So I think we all have an investment in the children, whether they're our own or other people's children. We want to make sure our schools are working and working well.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the last thing on the ballot, which we want to talk about, are that we have 3 state proposals. They are all free to amend the state constitution. And Rick, you were going to go into that.
Yeah, well, just to follow up on what you were saying with school boards, even if you don't have kids in school where you live, or grandkids, as the case may be, your property values are reflected by the quality of the schools. So you want to make sure that A, they're funded properly, and B, that they're led properly. So your school systems, whether or not you have kids or not, are your local school systems are important to you. They do have an impact on you. But yeah, I was going to say, let's start at the top of the ballot and roll down. We'll get to the if you want to scroll it up to the top. Basically, governor, lieutenant governor is they're not separated out. It's one. You just got one choice because they're a package deal. Garland, Gilchrist, and Gretchen Whitmer. And basically, if you like how Gretchen's been handling things for the last 4 years, then you should vote for another 4 years of her. Otherwise, Tudor Dixon, who's to my mind is in the pocket of Betsy DeVos in privatizing schools and all that. If that's your thing, then vote for them. Secretary of State, again, Jocelyn Benson has been improving services and protecting elections. Probably not up to Jan's spec, but certainly better than, to my mind, than Karamo, who, and I'm quoting here, thinks that demon possession is a sexually transmitted disease that two people, straight couples living together causes or leads to pedophilia. I don't know how that happens. And yoga is demon incantation. So if that's, and of course, Donald Trump is really the president of the United States. So those are your choices. For Attorney General, Dana's been doing, I think, a great job for the last 4 years, as opposed to her opponent, Matt DePerno, who will not even make an exception for the life of the mother in the case of reproductive rights, who is likely to be facing felony charges for voting machine tampering that he was orchestrating. And there's a high probability he's going to be disbarred. But yet you want to elect somebody as Attorney General that can't even argue a case in court because they're not actually an attorney. So those are some pretty stark what do you call it? It's a contrast there. As far as all your different state boards, or state school board and state colleges, the nice thing about that is they are labeled as Democrat or Republican. So, and she already talked about the judges, but basically, yeah, do your homework for your local ones. Know that the Democrats have nominated Richard Bernstein and Kyra Harris Bolden. Make sure if you do vote straight Democrat, understand that none of these nonpartisans are captures. None of these judicials are captured. You have to buy that. You still have to go in and fill those out. And it's very important. And the Republicans have been doing a great job of educating their voters on who to vote for in a judicial. And that's why the majority of these elected positions are held by Republicans, because Democrats tend not to even bother to vote, but Republicans do. So make sure it's definitely worthwhile. If we scroll down, to the ballot initiatives, basically you've got proposal 1 is financial disclosure and changing the term limits. Basically, the bottom line is, I think Mississippi's worse than Michigan as far as transparency of the finances of the state legislature. That's it. I mean, I think Michigan's rated like 49th. It's terrible. They can do, and I'm not saying they're all doing horrible things, but they could be doing horrible things and we don't know about it. So this transparency aspect is very, very important to my mind. Daylight is the best disinfectant. And then the other thing with the problem with the term limits right now is you can have 3 2-year terms as a state rep, or 2 or 3 4-year terms as a state senator, or I'm sorry, 2 4 years. But your 14 years is your max, is what they're saying. So this here is saying 12, but you can do all of them as a state rep or all of them as a state senator. I think that's better. I think that people that have only been in state house for 4 years now, they're all of a sudden they're the party leader. They're actually the speaker of the state house. I think some institutional memory has been lost, and I think that to force somebody to try to switch over to Senate after they turned out in the state, or that doesn't work for them. So I would say vote yes for that. That's the bottom line. It actually shortens it down to a 12-year term max, but you could serve all of them in one of the houses, either state Senate or state house, instead of being forced to try to switch back and forth. And if it doesn't work, then you can't run. So anyway, so yes on that. On proposal 2, if you want to scroll down a little bit, that's basically that just makes if you're the type of person that you believe that voting should be easy and there should not be barriers to voting, then you need to vote for proposal 2. If you're the type of person that thinks that voting is just crazy and out of hand and too many people are voting and, oh, this is awful, then this will make your life worse. So you don't want to vote for that. And then I'm voting yes for 2, because I think that voting should be easy. And then, to have a cutoff for overseas ballots or military ballots, if it doesn't show up by election day, is crap to me. Go ahead, Jan. Gee, you're on mute.
There we go. Most of the provisions in this proposal are already in state law. What we're seeing here is an effort to add protection to these provisions by putting them in the state constitution.
Yeah.
Because in 20 and 21, the Republicans were vowing to put into the state constitution a complete drawdown on these rights, which we've had for a long time, in some cases since 2018. So a lot of these things are not really new, but this gives them an additional protection by putting it in the state constitution, where it's much harder to mess with them.
Well, very good point. And that's not an idle threat when they say those things, because, for example, not once, not twice, but 3 times voters had voted on ballot initiatives to have straight party voting, like we were talking earlier. And not once, not twice, but 3 times Republican legislatures struck those ballot proposals down. Now, voters, not politicians, in 2018 enshrined that in the Constitution, so they can't do it anymore. So her point is well made. Thank you for sharing that. And then the final thing,
by the way, the organization that did that was Promote the Vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Voters, not politicians, successfully reformed redistricting in 2018.
Oh yeah. No, my bad. My bad. Yeah,
which is a very big deal.
Yeah. But it's a separate deal. And then if we scroll down just a little bit for the that basically the proposal 3 is basically enshrining a woman's reproductive freedom in the Constitution and striking down the 1931 law. And so, I mean, it's real simple. I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote. If you believe that a woman has a right to choose and you're for reproductive freedom, then you need to vote yes on this. If you feel differently, then you need to vote no.
I think, in addition, this proposal protects everyone's reproductive freedom, the right to birth control, the right to in vitro fertilization. These are not just women's rights.
Yeah, no, good point. And keep in mind too that reminds me that again, the Attorney General candidate on the Republican side, Matt DePerno, thinks that Griswold v. Connecticut should be overturned. And for those of you that don't have like law history, that Griswold v. Connecticut allowed married couples access to birth control without being prosecuted by the state of Connecticut. And the United States Supreme Court struck that law down and said, no, you can't keep married couples from having birth control. Well, Matt DePerno, who the Republican run for Attorney General, wants to take birth control away from married couples. I mean, he says he doesn't, but he wants to strike down the law that prevents states from doing that to people. So yeah, so not just women. Yeah, point.
and these rights, by and large, have been in place under the U.S. Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade and Griswold v. Connecticut for 50 years. Taking these away from people is definitely not very American.
Well, and here's the thing, Roe v. Wade has struck down and has taken away rights. It's the first that we're actually backtracking or backpedaling on rights to Americans. But then right after that, Clarence Thomas and many other Republicans have immediately went on record saying that, yeah, we need to get rid of Obergefell v. Snyder, Obergefell v. State of Ohio. I was confusing it with Roe v. mental block here. DeBoer v. Snyder was the Michigan case on marriage equality. They got rolled into Obergefell, but many other cases. The only one that he left off, as far as major ones that Republicans usually attack, is Loving versus State of Virginia, because he happens to be married to a white woman. So, but all the rest he thought was fair game. But they're all in the same category, and they're all basically rights that the Republicans are looking to roll back and take away. And for people that say, oh no, that's crazy, they won't do that. Well, that's the first thing they said after they won this one is, well, we got to take away this, and we got to reverse that, and we got to overthrow this. So, I mean, it's a fact. That's next on their agenda. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying Roe v. Wade, tick that box. Next.
Well, there are a lot of things we could go into about these proposals, but basically, Proposal 1 adds some transparency to the financial matters of our legislature, forces them to make public their personal transactions, and exposes the legislature to some transparency that they haven't had to meet. Proposal 2 pretty much locks in what we already have in our laws, but makes then these things less vulnerable to a political change of power. And proposal 3 protects us for the same rights that we had under Roe v. Wade for 50 years. So all of these I would characterize as very middle of the road proposals. They're protecting us, they're protecting what we've had all along, and we're being protected against radical right-wing actions. Agreed.
One thing I wanted to mention that is when it comes to same-day voting versus absentee ballot, there's the drop box option or the option that I normally avail myself of, or 2 options. If I vote in person on election day, I never show up before work because that's the longest lines. And I don't show up right after work because that's the longest lines. If you go between 9:30 or 10 o'clock, or let's say 10 and 11:30, you're not going to have that long of a line. Or if you go from 2 to 4, you won't have that long of a line. The better way to do it, though, is to show up to your local clerk's office, get a ballot from them, an absentee ballot from them, fill it out, and then turn it back in. And if you have any, they won't help you with like how to choose who you're going to vote for. But if you have any confusion or questions about where to sign this or where to close that or how to fill this out, the clerk's happy to help you with any kind of mechanical stuff. And that's what I always do. And you walk in, you grab your ballot. If you haven't filled out your application yet, you can fill it out right then and there, turn it in. They can hand you a ballot. You can vote and put it back in the envelope. And they got a box right there. You can drop it in. If you got any questions, they're right there to help you. And, you can be in and out of there in 10 minutes, depending on how long if you walk in there with a cheat sheet, then you'll be able to fill out the ballot pretty quickly. But if you maybe take longer if you're figuring it out as you go. But you don't have to do postage. You don't have to stand in line for 2 hours. I know that where I vote in Plymouth, typically I'm in and out from the door of my car back to the door of my car in 10 minutes. I mean, it's that quick. But like my girlfriend lives here in Ypsi, and she votes in Ypsi, and it's sometimes a 2-hour wait in line. Well, if you show up to the clerk, like I said, and do the absentee thing, it's 10 minutes. So you can avoid that line. And you can avoid worried about, is the post office, is Louis Joy going to lose my ballot? Or, you can avoid all that because you're going to put that in the clerk's box before you leave. So.
Well, we have some comments in the chat. Gail and Marshall, do you want to move us forward to our Q&A session?
Yes, my computer crashed, so I have moved devices momentarily. I don't believe that we have any questions. We do have a comment in the chat, though. But I did have a question of one thing that I know we talked about earlier, but have not covered yet. And I'm curious if either of you would like to share some of the ways in which a person who may have challenges reading or even seeing the ballot can get some help casting their vote.
Well, I'd be happy to address that. We've long had some pretty good provisions in Michigan election law that help our disabled voters, voters who are disabled in a number of ways. We've for a long time had the provision that if a person came to the polling place and requested assistance, they would get assistance from 2 election inspectors from 2 different parties to help them by having someone read the ballot items and questions and record their votes. And the second person doing this would be a check and balance on the other one. Now, a number of people are uncomfortable with that situation, and they also have the option to bring a friend or a neighbor to come in and help them. I had a blind neighbor who always wanted me to drive her to the polls. And I had to swear I was not her boss at work and I was not her union official, so that I was not unduly pressuring her in any way. And she trusted me to read her the ballot and to record her answers. In the last 20 years, we've had a number of new developments to meet the needs of voters who are disabled. And these are technological. We have a device now that we have in our polling places where a blind voter or otherwise disabled voter can use a screen to fill out a ballot and then answer or review that ballot before printing it, and then it goes to the tabulator. The technology for these devices is pretty good, but the problem is it doesn't really help the person who has more than one disability. So if I'm not able to read because I am dyslexic and I'd rather hear the material on the ballot read to me, I might have a hearing disability as well. So now what do we do? So these things are not perfect, and they have been criticized because they introduce a security vulnerability into the very careful chain of custody that we have in the polling place. But we're making small and gradual strides toward equality for our voters who are disabled, and that's important for everyone to know what's available to them.
Well, and all the more reason why they'd want to do absentee ballot in that situation, to where, you know, in the privacy of their own home with whatever assistance they need, they could go ahead and get that ballot completed.
Well, but sometimes people feel uncomfortable because they get pressured by family members. So you got to meet people where they are and deal with the situation they're in.
Yeah, and that's what I like. I know that, for example, I've heard stories of a Democratic woman married to a Republican man. She doesn't want to fill out an absentee ballot in the kitchen with her husband standing there looking at him. She wants to go into the polling place and vote without him standing over her shoulder. So yeah, agreed.
And my friend similarly did not want her own kids doing her ballots because she often disagreed with them. So,
Yeah.
But I think we're doing a decent job of assisting voters who are disabled, but it's not good enough yet by my standards.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. I think that is really important information to people, for people to have. Sorry about that. I was getting some feedback. Are there any other questions from the audience before we wrap up?
Yes, I've got a question. What? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay. Could you speak to voter suppression that I see in Ypsilanti specifically? One of the things that I don't see from the clerk's office is messaging to individuals that early voting started September 29th. And that you, Rick mentioned, you could go into the clerk's office and ask for an absentee ballot and cast your ballot right there during their hours. And that message, in my opinion, has not communicated to the eastern side or specifically to people of color. When I realized this, and I did my own polling during the primaries, many people did not realize that they could go to the clerk's office, during the weekday, and we listed the time, and also the Saturday before the election. That would help many people with childcare or the times that they go to work versus just on election day. And I do not hear that message being communicated in a way that people in neighborhoods that are predominantly Black. That is not a message that we receive. So I'm asking like a why. Why do we think that, and how can we message in a way that people understand that this is available for them?
I'll defer to you on that, Jan. You know Ypsi politics a lot better than, or Eastern Washington politics a lot better than I do. So.
Well, I don't know that it's a matter of a particular local politics. I see it as a failure.
She said Ypsi.
Well, okay.
I see it as a.
Well, then I said the state of Michigan. Let's say
Yeah, because I've been an election administrator in both the eastern part of Washington and the central part of Washington, and I think it's a failure of the state and the leadership of the secretaries of state that we've had to define a mission statement by local election administrators that our mission is to make sure that every qualified voter has the opportunity to cast a ballot and have their votes counted. Every qualified voter. It seems that in some areas it's just too much work. They don't want to bother. We have had the court order ordering Michigan to provide ballots to overseas and military voters 45 days ahead of the election day. We've had that since the war in Afghanistan. I had to get the ballots out because I had to get these ballots on a plane to Bagram Air Force Base because I had local voters who were in the military, and one colonel in particular who was really on my case about getting the ballots to his soldiers. And I thought that was great. And we had, in 2004, we had a fantastic cooperation between the US Postal Service and the military mail system. And we had an amazing hit rate of people getting their ballots in time and returning them in time. That's why you need that 45-day in advance. So if you've already got the ballots printed 45 days in advance, you might as well make those available to all your local voters too. And that's now why you get to come in and vote, basically, way ahead of the election if you want to do it that early. So this is just a word that we have failed to get out to people, is your ballot's ready for you. If you want to vote now, come on in.
Yeah. And
it's a hard thing to do if you're a township clerk up in northern Michigan and you are only a half-time employee. How are you going to make really big office hours? You need some more help. We haven't paid attention to that problem. Some of our communities in Southeast Michigan, we've got pretty big staffs and we can spread our time out and make sure we cover at least one day on the weekends. That's something we've really got to work on. And it's partly a matter of budget. It's partly a matter of mission statement. I think every local election administrator ought to have a mission statement. And when I put my mission statement up in my office, everybody who came in there knew that they could count on my staff to do whatever it would take to get them a ballot and to help them vote. And we would make special appointments for people who could only make it in on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. I had an airline pilot who was never in town for the election. And And he broke down in tears when I said, you can vote, here's your ballot. And I brought it to his house. You do what you have to do to make sure that people can vote.
Yeah, and then another adjunct to that, just because I'm in the middle of working on that, is like, for example, Genesee County Sheriff's Department. They've got pretrial detainees that are in their jail, but they're not convicted felons,
And they have to have a ballot.
Yeah, and that's what he makes sure. He makes sure that every single person that wants to get registered is registered, and they have access to voting. And on top of that, he's also actually organized, had all the mayor candidates for Flint come in and do like a little candidate forum for the detainees. And I'm in the process right now of helping out with we're having the state Supreme Court nominees coming in. We're having appeals court and some local district court nominees all coming in, going to talk to the detainees that are eligible to vote, and share their answer their questions, share their philosophies with and then a lot of these people, they might end up being in front of some of these judges. You don't know, but it's so who's more who is that more important to, the person that's going to be in front of that judge, or somebody that'll never ever be inside of a courtroom other than maybe to watch from the gallery? But so if nothing else, it empowers these people and makes them feel valued. I think a lot of times, people they don't reoffend when they feel valued, when they've got when they feel like they matter, and when they've got opportunities. And so I think this is a positive thing all the way around. And so that's I guess that's the antithesis of what you just described, Gail. And it's not really the answer to your question, but it's a answer.
And I would add, Rick, that it's not just our pretrial detainees who deserve the opportunity to hear candidates and to vote. We need to remember people who are houseless, who've been unhoused by our terrible economic situation and our horrible housing shortage. And these people are able to register to vote. You can register to vote with a non-traditional address. You live near the bridge under US 23. That's allowed under our law, but we make no other provision for these folks to participate in our elections. We should provide them with a post office box address if they don't have one, so they can get their ballot. And they don't have, they might be on a bicycle. They should be able to get their ballot some way, somehow. We've got to make sure that everybody can participate.
Agreed.
Another thing I would like to add to that is there are a lot of forums, but the people who don't know how to receive the forums, how can you make an informed decision by listening to someone? Do their values match up with yours match up with theirs? Now, Ypsi Can I Share has our talking ballot, and there are a few on there that chose to, answer our questions. However, because we do partner with League of Women Voters, we do have League of Women Voters that we're going to put on our website so that people can see and hear different forums. If you all have other forums that can be shared, on our website, I would appreciate that. And then that way a person can pick and choose, what forum you might want to listen to see if there's a candidate that you want to hear from that may not have answered Ypsi Can I Share. However, they might have answered League of Women Voters or somewhere else where we can just have a copy of a candidate that's on our ballot, statewide and local. So whatever you have, I'd appreciate, just sending it so we could posted if you have a copy. Thank you.
And I believe we are coming to the end of our time together. So I just want to say thank you to both of our wonderful presenters. Thank you to everyone who attended. We will be sharing this recording on our social medias on Ypsi Can I Share Facebook. So please, as we have talked about all night, one of the biggest challenges is making sure that everyone has access to the information. So please, if you found this conversation beneficial, which I'm sure that you have, share that video with the people around you, share it with your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, so that everyone that you come in contact with knows how they can exercise their right to vote. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Marshall and Gail.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.